They knocked just after 8. Not a warning, not a heads up, just 2 officers, a signed federal order, and a mother holding a spatula in one hand while her toddler sat at the kitchen table. Yara didn't cry right away. She asked if it was a mistake. One of the officers calmly told her, "This is final." And within minutes, she was gone. What happens when love, paperwork, and government silence collide? Hey everyone, I'm Sabrina, and this is TLC Drama Live, where we don't just recap the chaos, we trace it to its source. Today's story isn't just a reality TV shocker. It's the most heartbreaking chain reaction this franchise has ever aired. A woman pulled from her home, a family torn open, a legal system that doesn't blink, and a network forced to decide how much real pain belongs in primetime. Because what you saw on screen was only the surface. What was missed behind the scenes? Let's begin. On the outside, everything looked fine. Yara had started finding her rhythm in New Orleans, waking up early, feeding Mila before Jovi even had one eye open. The apartment was still a little cluttered, full of mismatched furniture and takeout boxes, but it felt like a home. Jovi was traveling less, trying to be present, trading late nights with friends for bedtime stories and baby bottles. They fought less, or at least, they fought quieter. Happily Ever After had them in a surprisingly mellow season. No screaming in public, no blowout fights over Europe versus Louisiana. Just long conversations in the car, gentle jabs about parenting styles, and the occasional dig from Gwen that felt more like a reflex than real drama. On camera, it looked like a slow path toward peace. Yara even said it herself in a confessional. "I think maybe we're finally understanding each other." But there was something under the surface. Not in their marriage, not in their parenting. It was in the paperwork. Visas don't wait for your life to calm down, and neither does USCIS. The producers had tried to get them to talk about immigration stuff on screen, but Yara usually brushed it off. "Everything is fine," she'd smile. "We have a lawyer." And the camera would move on. Behind the scenes, though, there had been a subtle shift. Their original attorney had taken on new clients, handed off some case files, and stopped responding quite as fast. Jovi mentioned once in passing that they were waiting on a renewal notice. Yara, busy juggling motherhood, trusted that the legal team had it covered. Why wouldn't she? They'd used that office before. It had worked before. But the letters started coming in. Slowly. The first one was standard. A request for evidence. Just routine, the kind of thing every immigrant goes through at some point. It asked for proof of cohabitation, proof of marriage stability, updated forms. And it had a deadline. No one saw it. Or rather, someone saw it. Someone at the lawyer's office. But it never made its way to Yara. It didn't even make its way to Jovi. And why would it? The mailing address on file was the attorney's office. That's what most people do. That's what they were told to do. So Yara kept living like everything was under control. The days blurred into preschool applications, grocery runs, makeup tutorials, and filming schedules. Mila started talking more. Jovi was trying harder. Things weren't perfect, but they were normal. And for this couple, normal was a win. But the system doesn't care if your life is peaceful. A second letter followed, more serious this time. Intent to deny. Still nothing reached their actual mailbox. Still no phone call warning them. Yara spent most of that month planning Mila's birthday and filming B-roll with the crew. She wore pastel dresses, talked about maybe opening a boutique, and brushed off questions about paperwork delays. The producers didn't push. They had other storylines to chase. Something small was already ticking in the background, waiting to explode. And then came the formal denial. That one should have triggered alarm bells. It should have led to a frantic phone call, an emergency appeal. A rush to fix what was missing. Instead, it got stamped received at the law office, marked no response, and quietly died in a pile of unopened mail. The clock started running. The case was referred to ICE for enforcement. Yara still didn't know. Jovi didn't know. Mila definitely didn't know. And while they filmed beach scenes and talked about taking a break from filming after this season, somewhere in a dusty mailroom, the final order of removal was already printing. Sitting in that lawyer's office, next to expired magazines and forgotten business cards, was a letter that would change everything. It started like most immigration issues do, quietly. The first letter, the request for evidence, is almost never urgent by itself. It's like getting a homework reminder. The government's way of saying, we need more proof that this marriage is still real, still stable, still cohabiting. For anyone who's been through a K-1 process, it's routine, and it's also time-sensitive. You usually get 87 days to respond. Yara's file was marked for that standard review. Maybe because it had been a while since her last update, maybe because the new baby changed their household status, maybe just because immigration offices do random reviews. It doesn't matter why. What matters is what happened next. That evidence was never submitted. The file sat still. Then came the intent to deny. That's the government's way of escalating. A second letter. It says, "You didn't answer. So unless we hear from you immediately, we'll consider your case non-compliant." This is where most people spring into action. It's the red siren letter. But again, it was sent to the attorney's office. And no one told Yara. She kept living like nothing had changed. Next came the formal denial. It doesn't mince words. It states that conditional residency has been revoked, that legal status has expired, and that because there was no appeal filed within the grace period, the case is closed. And closed means flagged. Immigration systems are automated. When that flag hits the record, it starts a countdown. The case moves from USCIS, the service side, to ICE, the enforcement side, from paperwork to people with badges. And here's where the dominoes don't stop. According to one immigration attorney not connected to the case but familiar with federal procedure, once a case goes from USCIS denial to ICE review, it's usually treated as abandonment. The assumption is, they didn't care enough to fix it, so we enforce the order. That's the part that burns. Because in reality, Yara did care. She just didn't know. The letters went somewhere else. The clock ran out somewhere else. The denial sat unnoticed until the system marked it as final. The file was handed off for enforcement. ICE doesn't just show up overnight. First comes the internal processing. The case is reviewed for risk level. Agents verify the address, confirm there's no ongoing appeal, and issue a removal order. That's the document that says this person is now unlawfully present. Detention is authorized. And once that order is signed, it's only a matter of time. What makes this case especially brutal is how preventable it was. Yara wasn't hiding. She wasn't dodging deadlines. She wasn't even out of communication. She was trusting the system, or at least the people she paid to navigate it for her. And the lawyer? The lawyer hasn't responded publicly, but according to multiple former clients, that office had already been slipping. Missed calls, slow filings, internal staffing cuts. Legal experts say this is where the system shows no mercy. In the words of one immigration professor, the U.S. immigration process is not designed for grace. If a case looks abandoned, it's treated like it is, regardless of the backstory. And by the time ICE is involved, compassion is no longer a factor. This wasn't drama for TV anymore. It was bureaucracy with handcuffs attached. That removal order was signed 3 weeks before Yara even knew she was in danger. Her name was typed at the top. Her file number was printed in the corner. And under the section labeled Basis for Removal, it read, "Failure to maintain legal status, no pending appeal, eligible for immediate enforcement." That document sat in a field office in Louisiana, while Mila watched cartoons, while Jovi packed for another work trip, while TLC prepped for the next round of filming. Everything on the outside looked like a reality show, but the paperwork underneath was building a scene no one would be ready for. ICE had what they needed. The order was in hand. The agents were briefed, and the address already verified. They were ready. The morning started like any other. Yara had already been up for half an hour. Mila was in her high chair, slapping a spoon against the tray. Yara had one slipper on and was pouring oatmeal into a tiny bowl, humming without even realizing it. The TV in the background played some cartoon, low volume. Her phone buzzed once. She ignored it. She was focused on the next few minutes. Breakfast, then a quick makeup reel for Instagram, maybe a walk before nap time. It was a normal day. At 8:06 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Not a soft one. Not the kind you hear from a neighbor or a package delivery. It was sharp, authoritative. 3 beats, silence. Then another knock, louder. Yara didn't panic. She just wiped her hands on her sweatshirt and walked to the door. She didn't recognize the men standing there. They were calm, dressed in plain clothes, badges clipped to their belts. She barely heard what they said at first. Something about immigration enforcement. Something about an order. She blinked, confused. "This has to be a mistake," she said. One of the agents explained. Slowly, carefully. The words, "final order of removal," landed like a slap. Yara's first instinct was to grab her phone. She dialed Jovi. No answer. The agents told her she had 10 minutes to collect personal items. Essentials. No suitcase. No phone calls beyond this. Mila started crying. Yara crouched next to her, trying to smile, trying not to show the panic building in her chest. Her hands shook as she packed a few things into a small tote. When she tried calling Jovi again, the call dropped. Downstairs, a government car waited. The crew wasn't there. Production hadn't been notified. This wasn't part of the show. There was no script, no lighting, just quiet footsteps, whispered instructions, and a child trying to understand why her mother suddenly looked like she was going away. Neighbors peeked through windows. Someone recorded a short video from across the street. That clip wouldn't hit social media until much later, but even then, it wouldn't capture what was happening inside that apartment. Yara asked one more time to wait for her husband. The officer told her they had orders. The law didn't bend for delays. Jovi's phone lit up 5 minutes later. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. By the time he checked it, he was already halfway to work. He didn't listen to the full message. He just turned the car around and started driving home like his life depended on it. Yara was sitting on the edge of the couch when he burst through the door. Mila ran to him. Yara stood up already crying. The agents turned toward him. One of them repeated the same thing. The order was final, the appeal was never filed, and they were proceeding as authorized. Jovi argued, demanded to see proof, demanded to call someone, anything. But the officers were calm, professional. They told him the system had been updated. The forms were never filed. There was no appeal in progress. Nothing pending. Yara tried to explain, her voice getting louder, more desperate. She said her lawyer had told her everything was fine, that all the paperwork was submitted, that she didn't miss any deadlines because she didn't even know there were deadlines to miss. None of it mattered. What happened in that kitchen changed how fans saw Jovi forever. He looked powerless. Not angry, not performative, just wrecked. He wasn't yelling at production. He wasn't blaming anyone yet. He was just begging for more time, begging them to let Mila say goodbye properly. But there was no space for that. Ice doesn't operate on emotion. Yara bent down, kissed Mila on the forehead, and whispered something no one could hear. Mila didn't cry right away. She just clung to Jovi's leg. The agents gestured. Yara picked up the small tote she had packed earlier. No suitcase, no extras. When she stepped outside, the Louisiana sun was blinding. As she walked toward the car, Jovi followed. "Yara!" he shouted. She turned around one last time. He was still holding Mila, still trying to understand how a filing error turned into this. The door closed. The engine started. And then she was gone. The house was quiet after the car pulled away. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that sinks into the walls and makes even a child's footsteps sound loud. Jovi stood in the doorway for a while, holding Mila in one arm, staring at the spot where Yara had just been. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Mila tugged at his shirt, asking for something. Juice, a cartoon, maybe her mother. He couldn't tell. He nodded without hearing her and walked to the kitchen on autopilot. He placed her in the high chair, gave her an apple slice, then sat down on the floor, right there in front of the fridge, and let himself fall apart. He wasn't loud. He didn't punch walls. He just sat there, shaking, whispering her name, over and over. Yara. Yara. He'd never cried like that in front of production before, but they weren't there yet. No cameras, no confessionals, just a man who realized too late that trust doesn't protect you from a system that stops listening. The crew showed up about 2 hours later. They'd heard something happened. No details, just that filming was paused. When they entered the apartment, Jovi was still on the floor. Mila had curled up next to him, confused but calm. She didn't understand. How could she? Her mother had been there 1 minute and gone the next. There was no explanation, no bedtime story that covered this scenario. Jovi eventually got up and called Gwen. She didn't answer the first time. When she finally picked up, her voice cracked before he said anything. She already knew something was wrong. He told her everything, as much as he understood anyway. Gwen rushed over with food and questions, but the questions quickly turned into self-doubt. She remembered a few pieces of mail she'd seen at the house weeks ago. Had she ignored something important? Was there a time she brushed off a conversation Yara was trying to start? They argued, not the kind of shouting match that ends with slammed doors, the kind where every sentence is soaked in guilt. Gwen asking if Jovi checked the legal status himself, Jovi asking why no one followed up when things started going quiet with the lawyer. Grief turned into blame before anyone even checked the facts. And then came the internet. Clips from the street video started circulating. Someone had captured Yara being walked to the car. You couldn't see her face clearly, but fans recognized her voice. Within hours, hashtags were trending. Justice for Yara. Dr. TLC knew. Deported by neglect. Everyone had an opinion, and none of them had all the facts. Some accused Jovi of failing to protect his wife. Others blamed Gwen, suggesting she had always been skeptical of Yara's intentions. A few cruel comments asked if this was all just a setup for a storyline. Jovi didn't respond. He couldn't. He was sitting at the kitchen table now, holding Mila's favorite stuffed animal in one hand, a legal pad in the other. Names and numbers. Immigration attorneys, emergency consultations, anyone who would take the call. He'd made 5 calls in an hour. 2 didn't answer. One said they don't handle deportation reversal. One wanted $5,000 up front. The last said maybe, but only if he could get the original documents, which were still locked in a law office that hadn't returned his messages. Mila asked again where Mommy was. Jovi told her the truth, but softer. She had to go somewhere, but we're going to bring her back. He didn't know if that was true. He just knew he wasn't stopping. Not tonight, not tomorrow. Not until someone told him there was absolutely no chance left. The baby monitor blinked. Mila had finally fallen asleep. Jovi didn't. He kept calling, one name after another, one voicemail after another. And when the sun came up the next day, his notebook was full. He was going to find someone who could fix this, because someone had broken it, and he wasn't going to let them walk away. Yara hadn't been in a government car since the day she arrived in America. This ride felt longer. The back seat had no handles. The windows were tinted from the outside. She didn't cry, not loudly. She pressed her lips together, breathing slowly, trying to hold herself together for as long as it would take to get answers. The agents didn't say much. They gave her a bottle of water, told her she'd be processed and interviewed, and that she could make one call once she was logged in. No time estimates, no empathy, just steps. The processing center in southern Louisiana wasn't a jail, technically, but it didn't need bars to feel like one. Fluorescent lighting, echoing halls, metal benches bolted to the floor. Everything beige, gray, or off-white. She was fingerprinted again, photographed again, given a number. Her purse was taken, her phone too. They gave her a blanket that smelled like plastic and a toothbrush in a sealed plastic bag. She was asked if she had any medical conditions. She said no. They asked if she had a child. She said yes. They asked who the child was with. She paused, then said, her father. That was all they needed. Yara was moved into a temporary dorm space. Not solitary, not general population either. A waiting area for people in legal limbo. There was no clock in the room. Time passed in flashes. Lights on, food tray dropped off, lights off again. Some women around her cried immediately. Some paced. Some were silent. Yara stayed still. She didn't sleep much. She didn't speak unless spoken to. When they asked her again for her immigration lawyer's name, she gave it. But she said she hadn't heard from him in weeks. One officer nodded like he'd heard that before. Even off camera, reality followed her. Cold, fluorescent, and unedited. On the second day, she met with a legal intake officer. Not a lawyer, just someone who checks eligibility for appeals. They told her she could request a motion to reopen, but it would depend on evidence that her lawyer was at fault. She nodded, quiet, controlled. She asked, "How long can they keep me here?" The answer was vague. Days, weeks, depends. They gave her a small booklet explaining her rights in English, Spanish, and Russian. She read it all, twice. She didn't argue with anyone. She didn't scream. She didn't ask for special treatment. The officers noted that in her log. Calm, cooperative, low risk. She still hadn't cried the way she wanted to. Not until they handed her a phone and told her it was time for her first monitored call. 10 minutes. No privacy. She sat in a cubicle with a wired handset, dialed the number she had memorized, waited. Jovi picked up on the second ring. "Yara," he said. His voice cracked. She answered, "I'm okay." He told her Mila was fine, that Gwen was helping, that they were talking to lawyers. She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. She said, "I didn't know. "I swear I didn't know." He said, "I know. I believe you." That was the moment the tears came. She put her hand over her mouth to keep the sound in. They talked fast. Too fast. She asked about Mila's sleep, about her favorite stuffed animal. She asked if her daughter thought she had left her on purpose. Jovi didn't know how to answer that. The call cut off at 9 minutes and 52 seconds. She sat there for a long time after. Phone buzzing, lights still overhead, her hands in her lap. The next day would start the same way. Wake up, lights on, roll call. But now, she wasn't waiting in silence. She was waiting with a purpose, because her daughter was still in New Orleans, and Yara was going to find a way back. The clip hit social media late that afternoon. A shaky phone video, filmed from the other side of the terminal at Louis Armstrong International Airport. It was grainy, barely 10 seconds long, but it was enough. You could see her frame. You could hear a child crying in the background. You could make out the badge on the officer's hip, and the unmistakable blur of tears on Yara's face. Within minutes, it was reposted hundreds of times. By the end of the night, it had spread beyond the fandom. Major gossip pages, immigration advocates, even verified journalists started sharing it with headlines like "Reality star deported at New Orleans airport" and "90-day Fiancé cast member removed from U.S. soil." The comments were immediate, and they weren't quiet. Some people lashed out at Jovi. "How could you let this happen? Didn't you know her paperwork was expiring? Why weren't you protecting her?" Others went straight for the legal system. This is what happens when bureaucracy becomes a machine. Cold. Heartless. Imagine being taken from your kid because your lawyer didn't check the mail. But the most vicious attacks were aimed at TLC. Did they know and do nothing? Was this real or just another plot twist? Why were the cameras rolling right after she got taken? The line between reality and production blurred. Fast. The cast stayed quiet. Most of them didn't post, but insiders said group chats lit up immediately. Some cast members were horrified. Others were terrified. Everyone suddenly realized how close they might be to the same nightmare. The pressure reached TLC headquarters within hours. Executives were pulled into emergency meetings. Producers started calling legal teams. Editors were told to pause all post-production on the current season until the network figured out what could legally air and what had to be cut. One internal source leaked that the footage of Jovi collapsing in his kitchen was already in the system. The question was whether to use it or bury it. The story left the screen and entered the courtroom of public opinion. Legal consultants warned them. Showing too much could be seen as exploiting a deportation case. Showing too little could look like a cover-up. Everyone was scared. There were talks about issuing a statement, about clarifying that TLC had no involvement in the legal process, that ICE acted independently. But they also knew that saying anything might trigger a wave of new questions they couldn't legally answer, so the network stayed quiet. Meanwhile, fans filled the silence. Theories flooded in. Some said Gwen had interfered behind the scenes. Others believed the couple had ignored warnings. Some were sure the show knew and had planned the storyline around it for ratings. The truth was more boring and more devastating. A missed letter, a broken chain of communication, a legal system that doesn't pause for explanations. But by the time truth reaches the internet, it's often too late. There were even people posting screenshots of old episodes, pointing out moments when Yara looked stressed, or when Jovi brushed off a paperwork conversation. They called those red flags, proof that this had been coming, but hindsight is easy. What's not easy is explaining to a child why their mom didn't come home. While hashtags climbed trends and headlines recycled each other, Jovi stayed offline. Yara wasn't allowed her phone. Mila didn't know any of this was happening. The world was yelling around them, and they couldn't say a word. Some fans started petitions. Some sent messages of support. A few offered free legal help. But the blame never settled in one place. Was it the lawyer who failed to submit documents? Was it the government who enforced an order without confirming if the client even knew? Or was it TLC who edited heartbreak into entertainment and walked the line between documentary and drama? You decide. Because at this point, the lines are blurry, the facts are buried under opinions, and the only thing louder than the silence is the audience. Jasmine was already on edge. Anyone who's followed her and Gino knows the tension never truly left their household. Even during quieter episodes, her energy felt charged, like she was waiting for something to go wrong. But this wasn't one of those usual meltdowns about texts or toothbrushes. this was different. The morning started with silence. Gino had fallen asleep on the couch after another late-night argument, and Jasmine was pacing in the hallway, her eyes bloodshot from not sleeping. They'd been fighting about trust, again, but not romantic trust this time. Legal trust. She'd asked him the night before if he'd heard anything new from their immigration attorney. Gino had mumbled that everything was fine, then rolled over and clicked the remote. She didn't believe him. And when her phone rang just after 6 a.m., the number didn't look familiar. Washington, D.C. area code. Her stomach dropped before she even picked up. The voice on the other end was cold. "This is to inform you that an immigration order has been issued. You must report to ICE by 10 a.m. today." That was all. No questions, no clarification. Jasmine stood frozen in the hallway. Her legs wouldn't move. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She held the phone out as if it were burning her. She whispered to herself, "What did they do? What did he do?" The producers were already on site. They were supposed to shoot a light segment. Jasmine trying to get Gino to repaint the guest bedroom. None of that happened. What they saw instead was Jasmine unraveling in real time. She wasn't yelling at first. She wasn't even crying. She was numb. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through old emails, looking for anything. Any notice, any update, any letter. Nothing. She muttered something about Gino's family trying to sabotage her. Something about custody. Then her voice cracked. "They're going to take me. I didn't do anything." Suddenly, every cast member with a visa started checking their mail twice a day. The crew didn't know what to do. They weren't trained for this. Jasmine's voice had shifted from dramatic to terrified, and everyone in the room could feel it. By the time Gino wandered into the kitchen, still half asleep, Jasmine had already packed a small bag. Not because she was running, but because she genuinely didn't know if she'd be home by the end of the day. "What's going on?" he asked, confused, rubbing his eyes. She turned to him, wild-eyed. "You said the attorney filed everything. You said we were fine." Gino's confusion turned into defense. "I thought we were. I didn't see anything different." She wasn't buying it. Jasmine pointed a trembling finger. "Your family has been asking about custody for months. Don't lie to me. You think I don't know what this is?" It spiraled fast. The crew kept recording. Not because they wanted to exploit her, but because the line between filming and witnessing had vanished. Jasmine sat down at the table and stared into space. "I'm being deported, aren't I?" she asked, her voice barely audible. No one answered. Someone from the production team made a call to TLC's legal contact. Someone else tried to reach the immigration attorney on file. Jasmine started rocking back and forth. Then she stood up again. "I need proof. I need to see the paper. There has to be a mistake." Gino tried to calm her. "Let's call them. Maybe it's a warning. Maybe—" She cut him off. "Maybe nothing. I know what I heard." She opened the window blinds like she expected to see black SUVs pulling up to the driveway. Then came the scream, loud, raw, from her chest. "Deportation!" she shouted. "They're going to deport me!" And just like that, her nightmare started echoing Yara's. One knock, one call, one system that didn't care if you were on a reality show or in the middle of fixing your life. The room fell silent again. But this time, no one could pretend it was scripted. Gwen came by early the next morning. She didn't knock. She let herself in with the spare key she'd always had but rarely used. Jovi was in the kitchen, same clothes as the night before, making scrambled eggs he didn't plan to eat. Mila sat at the counter with a toy in each hand, not asking questions, not really talking at all. She hadn't mentioned her mom since bedtime. Gwen stood in the doorway, unsure whether to speak. She hadn't seen Yara in weeks. Their last conversation was stiff, forgettable. Something about car seats or baby snacks. "I didn't know," she said finally. "Jovi, I swear to you, I didn't know." He didn't look up. "Neither did I." She walked to the table, set down a paper bag full of muffins. It was the kind of thing you do when you don't know how to help. "I thought everything was fine. You never told me there was a deadline," she said. He finally looked at her. "I didn't know there was a deadline. Yara thought the lawyer had it handled." Gwen's eyes welled up. She sat down. She started, then stopped. "I wish I had asked more questions. I wish I had checked in more." He didn't say anything. Every apology sounded like another accusation. Outside of that house, fans were picking sides. Some blamed Jovi. "He should have handled it. He's the American." The anchor. Some blamed Gwen. She never trusted Yara. Maybe she didn't care enough to ask. Some blamed the system. This happens all the time. It's not about TV, it's about broken immigration practices. Online comments flooded every post. Every old clip was dissected. That time Yara said she hated New Orleans, people called it a red flag. The episode where Gwen looked annoyed at her accent. Another red flag. But trauma doesn't always come with a villain. Sometimes it just comes with timing, silence, and assumptions. Gwen tried again. Do you think Mila remembers what happened? Jovi nodded. She knows Yara's gone. She doesn't know why. Gwen reached across the table. She's going to be okay. You both will. We're going to fight this. But the damage was already inside the walls. Later that afternoon, Gwen tried to pick Mila up for a walk. Jovi stopped her. Not today. She raised an eyebrow. Why? He hesitated. Because Yara's last memory before being taken was us fighting. And I'm not going to have Mila in the middle of that again. Gwen's face fell. That's not fair. I know, he said. None of this is fair. The truth is, families under this kind of stress often break before they heal. Psychology calls it displacement, when the person closest to you becomes the easiest target for pain you can't process. In private, Jovi hated that he was angry at everyone. At the lawyer, at ICE, at TLC, at himself, at Gwen. But mostly, he was angry at the fact that none of them could change what had already happened. Gwen left quietly. Mila napped with her stuffed bear tucked under her arm, not knowing the world outside her door had turned upside down. Jovi stood at the window, staring at the driveway. Not looking for anything, just breathing. He picked up the notebook again, scanning names of attorneys, scribbled notes from calls, immigration codes he didn't understand. He didn't know what the right move was yet. He didn't know if there was a right move. But he knew one thing. No matter what happened next, he was going to protect Mila, even if he had to do it alone. Jovi had never felt more out of his depth. Offshore rig work was complicated, sure, but it had structure, procedure, chain of command. Immigration law? That was a maze of deadlines, forms, case numbers, and terminology that made your eyes blur. But that didn't stop him from trying. The morning after Yara's call, he contacted a Louisiana-based immigration attorney who specialized in post-deportation stays. They spoke for an hour. The lawyer explained the possible path. File a motion to reopen based on ineffective assistance of counsel. Build an argument that Yara was never informed about the denial. Show that her lawyer mishandled time-sensitive documents. Prove she had no intent to abandon her status. It wasn't impossible, but it wasn't fast either. First, they needed documentation. Copies of emails, case filings, a signed affidavit from Yara, records of her communication with the attorney, and a formal complaint filed against that lawyer, which meant digging into a system where bar complaints go quiet for months. Jovi sat at his kitchen table surrounded by legal pads, manila folders, and sticky notes. He had help, a paralegal the firm assigned to organize documents, but the rest of it, that was on him. The lawyer made it clear. Time was everything. ICE didn't wait. Unless they filed for a stay of removal, Yara could be transferred or deported at any moment. And even if they did file, there was no guarantee it would be approved. Meanwhile, the internet had already decided who was at fault. Tweets accusing TLC of scripting it. Reddit threads calling Yara irresponsible. TikToks claiming the whole thing was staged for sympathy. Jovi didn't have time to scroll. Every hour counted. He was fighting deadlines while the internet fought narratives. He called the old lawyer's office 8 times. No answer. He sent a certified letter demanding access to Yara's full file. No response. So the new legal team filed a bar complaint with the Louisiana State Bar Association, not just to help the case, but to light a fire. The hope was to prove ineffective counsel. That would show the system failed, not Yara, that she trusted someone who didn't do their job. It's a narrow argument, but one that sometimes works, especially when it's backed by documented negligence. Jovi compiled everything. Texts where Yara asked for status updates, email timestamps showing no replies, USPS tracking proving the warning letters were delivered to the lawyer's office. It was a start. The legal team filed a motion to reopen. Then, a motion to stay removal. Now came the waiting. Every time Jovi's phone buzzed, he flinched. Was it ICE? A lawyer? TLC? News? He kept checking with the detention center. Was she still there? Had she been moved? They wouldn't tell him much. Privacy laws, they said. He asked if she was okay. They said, she's cooperative. That was it. The longer the silence dragged on, the more he second-guessed everything. What if the stay wasn't approved? What if she was already put on a plane? What if the appeal came too late? Fans, meanwhile, were still split. Some started GoFundMes. Others mocked them. One gossip account claimed TLC had filmed the entire ICE visit and was sitting on the footage. Another claimed Yara had planned it all to boost her following. Jovi couldn't keep up. He didn't try to correct anyone. He knew the only thing that mattered was whether the next update came from the courts, not from Twitter. He hung a photo of Yara and Mila by the front door, just so it was the last thing he saw every time he left the house. Because every errand felt like leaving Yara behind again. The attorney warned him, there's no guarantee. Even if we do everything right, ICE doesn't have to pause the removal. They can go forward until the court says otherwise. Will we know before she's moved? Jovi asked. Maybe, the lawyer said, maybe not. So he kept the phone charged, the car gassed, his schedule clear, because if a stay came through even with 10 minutes notice, he needed to be ready to drive. But if it didn't, he didn't let himself finish that sentence. Hope wasn't a strategy, but right now, it was the only thing he had. Fame feels bulletproof until it isn't. One day you're filming love stories in high def, the next you're begging a federal agency to read your appeal before they move your wife out of the country. The lights stay on, the mics stay clipped, but none of it matters when a single unopened envelope decides your family's future. Yara didn't vanish because of scandal. She didn't break the law. She didn't flee. She trusted someone to manage her paperwork and stayed focused on building a life that, from the outside, looked like progress. That's what makes this so hard to absorb. It wasn't a twist. It wasn't a plot point. It was a system breaking down quietly with no camera to catch it in time. There's something deeply unfair about how fast the narrative shifted. One week, she was posting family selfies. The next, people were dissecting her accent, her attitude, her wardrobe, like any of that could explain why she was taken away from her daughter. Let's be clear here. No amount of reality TV exposure protects you from federal deadlines. No amount of TLC branding can override a missed filing date. And no amount of sympathy online can undo a signed removal order. As someone who's watched and covered this show for years, I've seen all kinds of drama, affairs, catfishing, secret kids, fake proposals. But this one hit different. Because this wasn't about betrayal. It was about trust. Misplaced? Yes, but sincere. I'm Sabrina, and this is TLC Drama Live. And if you've been with me through this entire series, you know that we don't do shallow takes here. Gossip is easy, judgment is cheap, but understanding what really happened, that takes work. Let's close some loops. The lawyer who mishandled Yara's case is now facing multiple formal complaints. As of the last update, he's retained his own legal team and hasn't issued a public statement. But word is, this wasn't his first client to raise concerns. If those complaints gain traction, he could face discipline. Or worse. TLC has stayed almost completely silent. They haven't issued a statement, and while internal sources claim they're still reviewing what footage will make it to air, nothing's been confirmed. Some believe they'll quietly phase this storyline out. Others think they'll lean into the fallout. Either way, the cameras were still rolling when the damage hit. Jovi, for his part, has become a different man. No longer the guy who casually skipped town for work trips or brushed off hard conversations. He's focused. Present, guarded. He knows the world is watching, but for once, he doesn't care what the world thinks. His only focus is getting Yara home. And Mila, she still asks when her mommy's coming back. Every time she does, Jovi tells her the same thing. She didn't leave. She was taken. And that sentence, that quiet truth, says more than any episode could. Because it wasn't about drama. It was about loss. It was about a woman who did everything right, except rely on the wrong person, about a family caught between law and love, and a show that couldn't film fast enough to catch the real story before it broke them. You want to know what's next? Here's your teaser. We're hearing that several other cast members, past and present, have started quietly reaching out to immigration attorneys. Some are double-checking filings. Others are panicking over old warnings they ignored. And at least one couple may be considering leaving the country before paperwork forces the issue. The next story might prove that nobody on 90 Day Fiancé is ever truly safe from real life. Stay close. It's not over.